I'd like to go over our security framework, which is something that we built and can be customized basically for any size school. So our framework is built off of the National Institute of Standards and Technology's Cybersecurity Framework, also known as NIST CSF. This framework was originally designed for critical infrastructure, but due to it being very versatile, it can be used in organizations of all sizes. The framework is outcome driven, and the good thing is it doesn't define how the outcomes must be achieved. So this basically allows large and small cybersecurity budgets to achieve their end goals in a way that's feasible for them. With that being said, think of this framework as more of a process, not a specific product. And as you can see, there are 5 core functions that make this framework up. Starting in the top in blue, we have identify, then protect, detect, respond, and recover. These functions are organized concurrently with one another to represent a security life cycle. Each function is essential to a well-operating security posture and a successful management of cybersecurity risk. If you notice the last function, recover, in green, how it links back to identify. This illustrates that this is a life cycle or process that never ends. It's very important for a security process to constantly develop, self-evaluate, and adjust because attackers are constantly evolving their tactics. So now I'd like to dig into each core function a bit and explain what they do. So starting at identify, the identify function assists in developing an organizational understanding to managing cybersecurity risk. These risks can be to anything: systems, people, assets, data, even capabilities. Being the foundation of the 5 functions, it calls for organizations to develop a better understanding of how to manage risks associated within the system's data and capabilities included in their infrastructure. It revolves around pinpointing all of the systems and platforms included within the company's infrastructure. The important thing here to note is you can't protect what you don't know you have. So that's the important part of identify. So let's go through a few example outcomes categories. The first would be asset inventory and management. Simply put, this would include identifying physical, virtual, software, any type of asset within the organization to establish an asset management program. Then moving on to the next category would be risk assessment. This is basically identifying and documenting any vulnerabilities against the assets that you discovered. And the final one would be risk management. This includes reviewing the risks that you found and developing a strategy for your risk tolerance and your remediation goals. So protect is the next phase here, to develop and implement the appropriate safeguards to ensure the delivery of critical services. So the goal here is really to reduce the impact of an event by using best practices and security technology. Some example categories here would be identity management and access control. Who has access to what? Identity management and access control is the core of how your organization employees are authorized to access applications and data. Multi-factor access controls, password management, single sign-on, these are all critical technologies for identity management. Awareness and training is very important. How effective are your controls if the end users don't know the security basics? Phishing, spoofing, these are still the most successful attacks against most organizations. Knowing what to look for can save personal information, school information, and even reputation, like John covered before. User awareness training is a cost-effective way to mitigate many forms of risk. And the last outcome category here would be protecting technology. Supporting people and processes with technology can help your security resilience. Such technology can be anything from the endpoint firewall to endpoint antivirus, perimeter firewalls, etc. So we're going to move on to detect. In this function, we develop and implement the appropriate activities to identify the occurrence of a cybersecurity event. So with this function, this enables timely discovery of events. And this is critical because the faster an event can be detected, the faster it can be dealt with. This ensures that the effects of the event are minimized. So the first example category here is continuous security monitoring. Systems and assets should be continuously monitored to identify events and verify the effectiveness of the protected measures in place. A good example here would be detecting an account lockout. Do you know when your user's account gets locked out? Maybe if you knew, the administrator account on your domain was getting locked out for days, you might have known that it was under a brute force attack. So, knowing what's going on is half the battle. The next example category, anomalies and event alerting. Events should be detected promptly, and the impact of the events should be well understood. We know antivirus may alert that it cleaned up a detected item, but many times there are additional manual remediation steps required, and leaving that unchecked could result to a larger issue. Another important thing to note is having logs from every system. I know John covered that previously, but also keeping them immutable. Many times attackers will clear logs or even try to alter them to, hide their presence. So now we're going to move on to respond. This is to develop and implement the appropriate activities when facing a detected security event. So the respond function supports the ability to contain the impact of a potential security event. Without having this function ready if needed, delays are created and more opportunities for malicious actors to expand the reach of the threat. This can, lead to interrupted services or even stolen data. So response planning is one of the outcome categories here. In the event of a cybersecurity incident, there should be a process and procedure in place to follow. Communication should be managed, during and after an event with stakeholders, law enforcement, students, parents, external partners, etc. And mitigation activities should be performed to prevent the expansion of the event, to resolve the event, and also to incorporate any lessons learned from the current event or previous events. Now we're going to move on to recovery, which is our final phase here. So actually, just give me 1 second. I'm sorry about that. I misplaced one of my slides here. Okay, sorry about that. So recovery, to develop and implement the appropriate activities for resilience and to restore any capabilities or services that were impaired due to a security event. The recovery function supports the timely recovery to normal operations to reduce the impact from a cybersecurity event. So recovery planning and backup and disaster recovery would be the outcome categories here. Very important. Back up your data, test your restore processes. These are your last lines of defense against an event. You don't want to find out that you're not backing up a critical server when that critical server, was ransomware, when the disk array dies, when a natural disaster destroys the server room. Business continuity also plays a large role here within this function. It being more of a proactive plan to avoid disruption, whereas disaster recovery and backups are more of a reactive plan. So what we do with this NIST framework is we further define it into specific tracks within an organization: users, endpoints, infrastructure, and network. Each track, we then apply the 5 functions and score each one. What this does is this allows us to individually track and review each item and assist with finding weaknesses within the functions. So the 4 tracks are users, which can be anything from user identity, user access, authentication, or even policies. Endpoints, workstations, laptops, phones, tablets, really any device that can retrieve or store company data. Infrastructure, which consists of servers, applications, any type of network connected device. And the final track here would be network, firewalls, switches, routers, wireless, anything that facilitates company traffic flow. So here's a little matrix that contains a small sample of policies, procedures, and products. Some of these you may already have in use in your school, so this should hopefully help illustrate where these items fit within the framework. We're not going to go through every single item here, but I did pick out a few to go through. So really the first one, it's a very simple one, cost-effective Active Directory auditing. Reviewing Active Directory annually at a minimum is good practice. And we place this procedure within the users track under the identify function. So, Active Directory should always be purged of X users, whether it's staff, students, vendors, etc., to keep the environment clean and up to date. These accounts may appear harmless at first, but we have seen where attackers can use these accounts and potentially go unnoticed much longer than if they, say, created a new account that would stand out, within logs or alerts. To go along with this audit, and cleanup, you could deploy a employee departure policy or an asset disposal policy to ensure that Active Directory remains free of unnecessary accounts. These policies could be as simple as, a few steps that the administrator should take when a user leaves, such as, making sure the account's disabled, resetting the password, archiving any data, or even scheduling the deletion of the account at a later time. So the next sample item I'd like to cover, you'll see it spans all 4 tracks within the detect function, and that is the Security Incident Event Management, also called SIM. John covered this briefly in a prior slide, but in short, the SIM aggregates all events and logs from multiple systems into a single location. It analyzes the data, and it can alert whether it's specific rule sets or anomalies found. This allows for greater visibility into your environment and can help quickly and efficiently detect issues. And these logs can include anything from user access, who's connecting to what server, who's accessing certain files, maybe they shouldn't be, all the way down to configuration changes within the system. Having a SIM can greatly increase the efficiency of incident handling, saving time and resources. And more efficient incident handling ultimately speeds up containment and can decrease the extent of damage in many cases. Allowing your staff to quickly identify attack's route through the network can enable rapid identification of all the sources that were affected. In some cases, some SIM solutions can also provide automated mechanisms to stop the attacks while they're still in progress. So again, I'd like to emphasize on this slide, this is not a comprehensive list, but rather just a small sample of policies and procedures and products that can be used within the framework. So, and with that, I'm going to move on to an example ransomware attack, and we're going to review how the framework could help stop these chain of events. So in this example, you can see the attacker starts off by sending a malicious email to a user. The user then proceeds to open up the email and click the link. And in this example here, let's say the link was to a malicious Word document that spawned a reverse shell back to the attacker's system. Okay, this essentially allows the attacker to now control that user's machine, download any custom scripts, use built-in tools, and try to move laterally across the network. The attacker's goal in this phase is to access as many systems and machines as possible. Once they're satisfied with their newly gained footprint, they'll begin to exfiltrate data back to their own servers. This data will typically be confidential, financial, the type of data you do not want released publicly. And they will then use this data either as collateral for non-payment, in a ransomware event, or even just sell it on the dark web to the highest bidder. And then if things weren't bad enough, they will then proceed to encrypt the compromised systems and demand a payment for the decryption key at the end. So let's review how the framework can help stop this chain of events. And just to note, some of these attack phases, there could be multiple items that could stop this. I just picked a sample set to help illustrate, how this layered approach works. So in the first phase here, starting in the email phase, email protection technology, which is called for from the protect function in the infrastructure track, could have stopped this malicious email from even getting to the user's mailbox. But again, this is an example. Let's hypothetically say, that wasn't in place and the message made it. The protect function, again, but within the user's track, called for cybersecurity training for all staff. So, if the end user had proper training, maybe they would have known better than to open the unexpected attachment. Again, we're going to presume that did not take place. So this particular machine in this example was not known to the IT staff. We also, often refer to this as shadow IT, which is, the use of devices without the approval or setup from the IT department. So, a simple network asset discovery solution would have ensured that IT knew about the system and knew it was on the network. And because they didn't know about the machine, it didn't have antivirus installed, which could have possibly detected and stopped the malicious code from running. In the next phase with the lateral movement, this is where a SIM comes into play. Collecting logs from every system, it could have potentially detected abnormal behavior of the attacker moving through the systems. Even potentially stopping it without any IT staff interaction. An important thing to note here, some of these stages are purposely done off hours to the entity that they are attacking, such as lateral movement or exfiltration, even data encryption. This often gives the attackers potentially more time to do harm because they know most, the IT staff are not actively working. So now we're going to move on to data exfiltration. The incident response policy and procedure called for from the respond track could have helped stop the exfiltration of data by calling for, the shutdown of the affected system as soon as the attack was detected. Having a policy and procedure to follow when an event like this takes place can be detrimental to minimizing the effects of the attack. And finally, because all the systems were backed up, the affected workstations and servers were able to be restored with minimal data loss. Beyond the FBI not condoning ransomware payment, you're never guaranteed that the attacker is going to be good on their word.